A glass-walled restaurant on the top floor, soft string music floating through the air, a VIP table, mocking laughter. Be my husband for 9 months? Oh, look, she's advertising for a rental husband. A beautiful young heiress in a satin dress, burgundy velvet ribbon in her hair, stood motionless, jaw clenched tight. A man in a simple shirt calmly placed a 9-minute hourglass on the table. He looked up, his voice deep and steady. Choose your words carefully and choose how to be human correctly. The entire table fell silent as stone. The heiress's eyes locked onto the small calendar card with 9 punched holes in his hand. 24 hours earlier, Evan Cole stood at his kitchen counter, watching his 7-year-old daughter Ava carefully cutting and pasting calendar pages into what she called her 9-month map. The morning light streamed through their modest apartment window, illuminating her concentrated face as she worked with scissors and glue. Daddy, Ava looked up from her craft project. Is 9 months enough time to change someone? Evan paused while making her breakfast, his hand instinctively moving to the small pocket calendar in his shirt. A simple card with 9 holes punched in it. 1 hole had already been punched through. That depends, sweetheart. Change them how? Into someone better, she said matter-of-factly, returning to her paper cutting. At 34, Evan worked 2 jobs to support them both. Days were spent maintaining refrigeration systems for office buildings, evenings delivering food orders across the city. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest, and it kept them afloat. In his wallet, carefully preserved in plastic, was a crumpled receipt for $9. The last meal he'd shared with his wife at the hospital cafeteria before she passed away. Next to it, he kept something far more precious, an olive green fountain pen with an inscription carved along its barrel. Say it only when you mean it. The pen had been a gift from someone he'd once helped, a distinguished older man who had pressed it into Evan's hands with grateful tears in his eyes. From someone anonymous, the man had said, to someone who saves without asking for recognition. Evan's phone buzzed with a work notification. Lane Group needed emergency maintenance on their cooling system at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel. They were hosting some kind of major shareholders meeting and banquet tonight. Come on, Ava, he said, packing his toolbox. Daddy's got to fix someone's air conditioning. The Grand Metropolitan's lobby gleamed with marble and crystal. As Evan wheeled his equipment cart through the entrance, he immediately felt the weight of disapproving stares. A woman in an expensive suit approached him with a practiced smile. Excuse me, she said sweetly. The VIP area is being prepared for tonight's event. Perhaps you could work from the service entrance? It would be better for, appearances. Behind her, a man in a $1,000 suit chuckled. Maybe if he spent 9 months learning proper etiquette, he'd know where he belongs. The comment drew snickers from nearby guests. Evan simply nodded and redirected toward the service area, but the phrase 9 months hung in the air like a challenge. As he set up his equipment near the main dining room, Evan unconsciously touched the olive green fountain pen in his pocket. The weight of it reminded him of promises made and kept, of words spoken only when they carried true meaning. Through the dining room's glass partition, he caught a glimpse of a young woman with striking features and an aura of controlled authority. Her dark hair was pulled back with a burgundy velvet ribbon, and she carried herself with the careful precision of someone who had learned early that every gesture was watched and judged. Their eyes met for just a moment across the glass. She held a sealed manila folder against her chest like armor, her expression unreadable as marble. In that brief exchange, neither knew that their lives were about to become intertwined in ways that would challenge everything they thought they understood about respect, dignity, and the true meaning of commitment. Evan returned to his work, the olive green pen warm in his pocket, while somewhere in the hotel's upper floors, decisions were being made that would bring their worlds crashing together. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from. It's incredible to see how far this story can travel, and remember to subscribe so you don't miss the explosive moments ahead. Now, back to the story. Lana Lane stood in her corner office on the 42nd floor, staring at the sealed folder that would determine her entire future. At 27, she was the sole heir to Lane Group, but her father's will contained a clause that had become her nightmare. Arthur Lane's final stipulation was crystal clear. Within 9 months of this announcement, if Lana has not demonstrated family stability through engagement or marriage, voting rights will transfer temporarily to the Board of Trustees. The cruel irony wasn't lost on her. The media had twisted this private family matter into a spectacle, with tabloid headlines screaming, "Heiress seeks 9-month marriage rental." The phrase had become a weapon used against her daily. Lana touched the burgundy velvet ribbon in her hair, her armor against public scrutiny. Every time the pressure mounted, she tied it tighter, a small act of defiance that helped her maintain composure. The pre-meeting dinner was already a minefield. As she entered the Grand Metropolitan's private dining room, she could hear the whispers and barely contained laughter from the board members and business partners seated around the mahogany table. "Well, well," Marcus Thornfield, the lead legal counsel, smirked as she approached. "How's the husband hunt going, Lana? Found any suitable candidates for your 9-month arrangement?" The table erupted in cruel laughter. Victoria Sterling, a longtime board member, leaned forward with mock concern. "We have some excellent suggestions. Men who are very good at performing roles." "Perhaps we should post the position online," another voice chimed in. 9 months, all expenses paid, acting skills required." Lana's jaw clenched, but she remained silent, taking her seat with practiced grace. The burgundy ribbon felt tight against her scalp. That's when everything changed. From the service area near the main dining room, a man in work clothes appeared. He moved with quiet confidence, carrying a small toolbox, but his presence commanded attention in a way that expensive suits never could. Evan Cole stepped into the dining space and calmly placed a small hourglass in the center of the table. The 9-minute timer was elegant in its simplicity, its brass frame catching the chandelier light. "Careful with your words," he said, his voice deep and measured. 9 months is the time it takes for life to begin. Too long to live a lie. Too short to learn respect. The room fell completely silent. Every face turned toward this unexpected interruption, confusion and indignation written across their features. Lana found herself turning to face him fully, something stirring in her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. Hope? Recognition? She couldn't name it, but Evan wasn't finished. He reached into his wallet and withdrew something that made several people lean forward, a plastic-wrapped receipt. He placed it gently beneath the hourglass like an offering. $9, he said quietly. "The cost of my last real meal with someone I loved. The price of authentic connection." Marcus Thornfield's face reddened. "Who the hell do you think you are? This is a private business dinner." Evan's gaze moved to him with laser focus. "I'm someone who learned how to keep promises during the 9 hardest months of my life." The weight of his words settled over the room like snow. There was something in his tone, not arrogance, but the quiet authority of someone who had survived real trials. Lana felt her breath catch. "Who taught you to say things like that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "A man who wrote very smoothly with an olive green fountain pen," Evan replied, his eyes meeting hers directly. The response hit Lana like a physical blow. Her hand flew instinctively to her chest, where she wore a small pendant hidden beneath her blouse. A pendant that matched the description of a pen she knew all too well. Her father's pen, the one he'd given away years ago to someone who had saved his life. "You're impossible," Victoria Sterling snapped, standing abruptly. "Security should remove you immediately. This is harassment." But Evan remained perfectly calm, his hand resting lightly on the hourglass. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here because someone once told me that respect isn't something you demand. It's something you demonstrate." The sand in the hourglass continued its steady fall, marking time in a room where time had suddenly become the most precious commodity of all. Marcus leaned forward aggressively. "You have no idea what you're interfering with. This is about billions of dollars in serious business decisions." "I understand completely," Evan replied. "This is about a woman being mocked for something that was never her choice to begin with." Lana's eyes widened. He understood. Somehow this stranger grasped what no one else had bothered to see, that the 9 months wasn't about finding a convenient husband, but about surviving a test designed by her father. "The tabloids got it wrong," Evan continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. This was never about renting a husband. This is about proving character under pressure. The dining room was so quiet you could hear the sand falling in the hourglass. Every eye was fixed on this maintenance worker who had somehow seen through the lies and manipulation that had clouded the truth for months. Lana stared at him, her burgundy ribbon suddenly feeling less like armor and more like a lifeline. For the first time in 9 months, she felt like someone was standing in her corner, not for money or power, but for the simple reason that it was right. The hourglass marked another minute past, and everything was about to change. The shareholders' meeting room buzzed with tension as the formal session began. The morning's confrontation had left everyone on edge, but business had to proceed. Marcus Thornfield stood at the podium, shuffling through papers with barely concealed irritation. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "before we discuss quarterly reports, I believe we should address the unusual circumstances surrounding Miss Lane's inheritance clause." A murmur rippled through the room. In the back, Evan continued his maintenance work on the air conditioning unit, but every word was crystal clear. The moderator, clearly enjoying the drama, picked up a tablet and read aloud. "Recent headlines have been quite colorful. Let me see. Be my husband for 9 months. Oh, that's an interesting one." Scattered laughter filled the room. Lana sat perfectly still, her burgundy ribbon catching the light as she maintained her composure. Then came the moment that changed everything. A board member named Richardson, emboldened by the crowd's energy, turned toward Evan with a cruel smile. "Hey, maintenance guy, since you seem to have opinions about everything, would you be interested in the 9-month husband position?" The room fell silent, waiting for the humiliation to unfold. Evan straightened slowly, setting down his tools. He walked toward the conference table with measured steps, his presence filling the room despite his simple work clothes. 9 months, he said, his voice carrying absolute clarity, is enough time to nurture life, but too short to perform a marriage. I don't perform. The words hit the room like a thunderbolt. Every person froze, the weight of his response settling over them like a heavy blanket. Lana's breath caught in her throat. The simple honesty of his statement cut through months of political maneuvering and media mockery. Marcus, sensing his control slipping, reached for a folder of fabricated tabloid stories. "These ridiculous rumors have painted Miss Lane as some kind of desperate—" "Stop!" Lana's voice cut through his speech like a blade. She stood slowly, reaching for the sealed manila folder she'd carried since morning. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed it on the conference table, but her voice remained steady. "Before anyone says another word, there's something you need to understand." The room watched in fascination as she broke the seal with deliberate care. Inside were several documents, but the top page was clearly handwritten in elegant script. "This," Lana announced, "is the complete will addendum that none of you have seen." While she spoke, Evan's mind drifted to a memory 10 years old. A smoke-filled elevator in this very building. A young woman trapped inside, unconscious from smoke inhalation. Him, a new maintenance worker, carrying her to safety, delivering her to a distinguished older man who wept with gratitude. That man had pressed an olive green fountain pen into Evan's hands. "Pay it forward," he had said. "When someone needs saving, you'll know." Meanwhile, Lana's own memories surfaced. That terrible night when the elevator had malfunctioned, filling with smoke from an electrical fire. Waking up in her father's arms, safe, alive. Her father speaking in hushed, grateful tones to someone who had already disappeared. "My father wrote this section in his own hand," Lana continued, using his favorite fountain pen, the olive green one he treasured above all his possessions. She began to read. "The 9 months are not a condition for marriage, but a test of character. If my daughter can maintain her dignity and protect the dignity of others during 9 months of public scrutiny, she will have proven herself worthy of the Lane legacy." Gasps echoed through the room. "But," Lana's voice grew stronger, "if she humiliates or abandons the vulnerable to protect her own reputation, the voting rights will remain with the trustees." The revelation hit like a seismic shift. This wasn't about finding a husband. It was about proving moral character under pressure. Evan reached into his wallet and withdrew the olive green fountain pen, holding it up for everyone to see. "This pen has a serial number," he said quietly. Lana's eyes widened. From her hair ribbon, she pulled out a small metal clip, barely noticeable, but clearly bearing an engraved number. "The matching authentication code," she whispered, staring at the clip. "Father gave me this years ago, said it would help me recognize someone important." The serial numbers matched perfectly. The room erupted in shocked murmurs as the impossible connection became undeniable. This wasn't coincidence. It was destiny completing a circle. 10 years ago, Evan said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room, "I pulled a young woman from a smoke-filled elevator. Her father gave me this pen and told me to pay forward the kindness. And today," Lana added, her voice thick with emotion, "you did exactly that." Richardson, who had started this confrontation, now sat in stunned silence. The board members who had mocked the 9-month marriage were realizing they had completely misunderstood the situation. Marcus Thornfield's face had gone pale. The legal implications were staggering. If Lana had indeed been protecting someone vulnerable, Evan's dignity during their mockery, she had already begun fulfilling her father's true challenge. "The test wasn't about finding a husband," Lana said, looking directly at the assembled board. "It was about finding the courage to stand up for what's right, even when everyone else is laughing." Evan placed the fountain pen on the conference table next to the hourglass, which still had several minutes of sand remaining. "Your father was a wise man," he said to Lana. "He knew that real character isn't tested in comfortable moments. It's revealed when everyone else has given up on doing the right thing." The macro spike hit its peak as everyone in the room realized they had witnessed something extraordinary. Not just a business meeting, but a test of humanity itself. And there were still bigger revelations to come. The conference room remained in stunned silence as the implications of the pen authentication sank in. But Marcus Thornfield wasn't ready to surrender his position without a fight. "This is all very touching," he said, his voice dripping with desperation. "But we need concrete legal proof of what these 9 months actually mean. Where's the documentation that this isn't exactly what the tabloids claim?" Several board members nodded, still clinging to their original narrative. The room's energy shifted as doubt crept back in. "Proof?" Richardson chimed in, emboldened by Marcus's challenge. "We have a legal obligation to the shareholders to verify these claims. Anyone can create a story around an old pen." The vultures were circling again, sensing an opportunity to regain control. That's when Lana opened the manila folder completely. "You want proof?" she said, her voice steady as steel. She lifted out several more documents, each one bearing official seals and watermarks. "These are the forensic analysis reports on the ink composition, handwriting authentication, and paper dating." The room leaned forward collectively. "Every word of my father's addendum," Lana continued, "was written with this exact fountain pen." She gestured toward Evan's pen. "The ink composition matches perfectly. The handwriting analysis confirms authenticity, and the paper dates to exactly 18 months ago, 6 months before his death." She spread the documents across the table like playing cards revealing a royal flush. "But the most important document," Lana said, reaching deeper into the folder, "is this." She withdrew a photograph, aged but clear. It showed Arthur Lane in a hospital bed, very much alive, writing with the olive green fountain pen while medical equipment beeped around him. "This was taken during his final hospitalization," she explained. "He spent his last weeks writing letters to people who had impacted his life. People who had shown him that true worth isn't measured in stock prices." Evan stepped closer, studying the photograph. In the background, barely visible, was a small calendar on the hospital nightstand, a calendar with 9 months circled in red ink. He was planning this from the beginning, Evan realized aloud. The 9 months wasn't arbitrary, it was deliberate. Lana nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. He told the nurses he was writing instructions for the tests that would matter most. They thought he meant medical directives. She pulled out the final document, another handwritten letter, this one bearing a date just 3 days before Arthur Lane's death. "This is his personal letter to me," she said, her voice growing softer. "He wrote, The 9 months aren't about finding someone to stand beside you, Lana. They're about proving you'll stand beside someone else when they need it most. The room was completely silent now, the weight of Arthur Lane's wisdom settling over everyone like a benediction. He knew, Lana continued reading, that after his death, people would test you, mock you, try to break your spirit. The 9 months are your chance to show that you learned what I tried to teach you, that defending others is more important than defending yourself. Marcus Thornfield's face had gone ashen. The legal implications were devastating. If Lana had indeed been protecting others' dignity during these months of scrutiny, she had been fulfilling the will's true requirements all along. But there's more, Lana said, her voice barely above a whisper. She reached into her pocket and withdrew something unexpected, a small calendar card identical to Evan's, but with different holes punched. He gave me this too, she said, holding it up. I've been marking my own 9 months, not counting down to find a husband, but counting through each moment I chose dignity over convenience. Evan pulled out his own calendar card, the one with holes he'd been punching to honor his late wife's memory. They placed them side by side on the table. The patterns were different, but the message was identical. Both had been marking time through seasons of grief, growth, and commitment to something larger than themselves. Layer 3, Evan said quietly, understanding dawning in his eyes. This isn't about your inheritance at all. It's about creating a foundation for something bigger. The Arthur Lane Foundation for Character Education, Lana confirmed, pulling out one final document. His real legacy project. He wanted to ensure that whoever inherited his wealth would use it to teach others about dignity, respect, and moral courage. The revelation hit the room like a seismic shift. This wasn't just about a business succession. It was about transforming a corporate empire into a force for positive change. Richardson shifted uncomfortably in his seat. So you're saying this whole time, Lana finished, everyone who mocked the 9-month marriage was actually participating in the test. Every cruel joke, every tabloid headline, every moment of public humiliation was an opportunity for me to prove I could protect others' dignity while under attack. Marcus gathered his papers with shaking hands, realizing that his months of legal maneuvering had actually been helping Lana fulfill her father's true requirements. And today, Evan added, looking around the room, when you all laughed at someone you thought was vulnerable, the test reached its culmination. The board members sat in stunned silence, understanding finally dawning that they had all been unwitting participants in Arthur Lane's masterpiece of moral engineering. The 9 months hadn't been about finding a husband. They had been about building character, one difficult moment at a time. The hallway outside the conference room felt like another world. The marble floors reflected the afternoon light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, and the sounds of the city buzzed far below. Ava held her father's hand tightly, looking up at him with curious eyes. Daddy, can I punch the second hole now? Evan smiled and handed her the small calendar card. With careful precision, Ava pressed her finger through the second hole, the paper giving way with a soft pop. 2 months, she said proudly. 7 more to go. Lana approached slowly, holding the plastic-wrapped $9 receipt in her hands. She knelt down to Ava's level and offered it to her. Will you keep this for me? Lana asked gently. To remember that the most valuable meals aren't always the most expensive ones. Ava accepted the receipt with the solemnity of someone receiving a sacred trust. The three of them stood together by the massive windows overlooking the city. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but full of possibility. Evan reached for the 9-minute hourglass and turned it over once more, placing it carefully on the window ledge. The sand began its steady descent, marking time in a world that suddenly felt full of potential. Lana lifted the olive green fountain pen from the conference table. This chose you better than it ever chose me, she said, offering it to Evan. He shook his head gently, pushing the pen back toward her. No one owns respect. Everyone has to write their own story. The elevator chimed softly. The doors opened to reveal 3 figures, independent auditors and a lawyer from the Attorney General's office. People who belonged to no faction, no agenda. They looked at Evan, then at Lana, then at the hourglass counting down on the window ledge. The lead auditor spoke with professional brevity. The 9-month evaluation begins today. Ava carefully tied the burgundy velvet ribbon around Lana's wrist like a friendship bracelet. Lana looked down at the simple gesture, her eyes glistening with tears. "Thank you," she whispered, "little keeper of promises." The camera pulled back slowly, showing 3 silhouettes against the massive window: a man, a woman, and a child. Between them lay the olive-green fountain pen, and on the ledge the hourglass continued its eternal countdown. No one spoke another word. The story ended not with answers, but with the profound silence of a moment pregnant with infinite possibility. In the distance, the city sparkled with millions of lights, each one representing a life, a choice, a chance to choose dignity over convenience. The sand continued to fall. If you were given 9 months to prove something about yourself, what would you choose to demonstrate? Love, honor, or truth? Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know where you're watching from so we can see how far this story has traveled.